For over 400 years, one of history's most powerful women has kept her darkest secret buried beneath layers of royal propaganda and carefully crafted mythology. Elizabeth I of England, the legendary Virgin Queen who ruled for 45 years and transformed a small island nation into a global empire, may have been hiding something so shocking that it would have destroyed not just her reign, but the very foundation of the Tudor dynasty itself. The official story is one we've all heard. Elizabeth chose to remain unmarried, sacrificing personal happiness for the good of her kingdom. She famously declared herself married to England, turning her virginity into a weapon of statecraft that kept foreign powers guessing and her own nobles in line. But what if this wasn't a choice at all? What if the Virgin Queen's celibacy wasn't noble sacrifice, but desperate necessity born from a secret so dangerous that revealing it would have meant death? Recent historical investigations have uncovered whispers that have echoed through the centuries, fragments of letters, coded diplomatic reports, and testimonies from those closest to the throne that paint a very different picture of England's most enigmatic monarch. Foreign ambassadors wrote in cipher about peculiarities they observed at court. Her own ladies-in-waiting left cryptic references to the Queen's condition in their private correspondence. Even her personal physician's notes, hidden for centuries in royal archives, contain references that historians are only now beginning to decode. The Virgin Queen's image was so carefully constructed, so fiercely protected, that anyone who dared question it faced imprisonment, exile, or worse. Her spy master, Francis Walsingham, maintained a network of informants whose sole purpose was to monitor and silence dangerous rumours before they could spread. But despite centuries of censorship and propaganda, the truth has a way of surfacing. Tonight, we're going to uncover what Elizabeth I was really hiding. A secret so profound that it challenges everything we thought we knew about one of history's most celebrated rulers. We'll examine the evidence that's been deliberately buried, decode the cryptic messages left by those who knew the truth, and finally reveal why the Virgin Queen's greatest victory may have been the ultimate deception. The woman who said she had the heart and stomach of a king may have been hiding something that made her more vulnerable than any monarch in English history. What you're about to discover will forever change how you see the golden age of England. To understand the secret that would define Elizabeth's reign, we must first journey back to the blood-soaked court of her father, Henry VIII, where survival meant mastering the art of deception from childhood. Elizabeth Tudor entered the world under a death sentence she didn't even know existed, the illegitimate daughter of Anne Boleyn, the woman Henry had executed when Elizabeth was barely 2 years old. By the age of 3, Elizabeth had been declared a bastard, stripped of her title as princess, and cast aside as her father moved through wife after wife in his desperate quest for a male heir. She learned early that in the Tudor court, your very existence could be a crime, and that the slightest misstep could lead to the executioner's block. Her half-sister Mary had shown her exactly what happened to those who crossed the crown. During Mary's bloody reign, Elizabeth spent months in the Tower of London, the same fortress where her mother had been beheaded, waiting to discover if she would meet the same fate. But Elizabeth possessed something that would prove more valuable than royal blood, an almost supernatural ability to read people, to anticipate their moves, and to craft whatever image would keep her alive. She survived Mary's purges by becoming a chameleon, appearing devoutly Catholic when necessary, humble when required, and always unthreatening. She learned to hide her true thoughts, her real emotions, and most importantly, any weakness that could be exploited by her enemies. When Mary died childless in 1558, Elizabeth ascended to a throne surrounded by vultures. She was 25 years old, unmarried, and considered by many to be illegitimate. Catholic Europe refused to acknowledge her right to rule. The Pope had declared her a heretic. Philip II of Spain, the most powerful monarch in the world, was actively plotting to remove her. At home, powerful nobles questioned whether a bastard woman could truly rule England, while Parliament demanded she marry immediately to secure the succession. Elizabeth's legitimacy hung by the thinnest of threads, and everyone knew it. Every decision she made, every public appearance, every word she spoke was scrutinized for signs of weakness. Marriage became the ultimate test. Would she submit to a husband as women were expected to do? Or would she find another way to secure her power? The pressure was relentless. Ambassadors reported back to their kings about her appearance, her behavior, even her monthly cycles, searching for any intelligence that could be used against her. But Elizabeth had learned something crucial during those dark years of survival. Control the narrative, and you control your destiny. She began to craft an image that would protect her from the one vulnerability that could destroy any female ruler: the assumption that she was weak, emotional, and in need of male guidance. The Virgin Queen persona wasn't just political theatre. It was a fortress built around secrets that, if revealed, would have brought down not just Elizabeth, but the entire Protestant Reformation in England. What she was about to hide would require a deception so complete, so carefully maintained, that it would fool the world for over 4 centuries. In the shadowed corridors of Greenwich Palace, whispers began to circulate among Elizabeth's most trusted servants. Whispers that would have meant death if they had ever reached the wrong ears. The Queen, they murmured behind closed doors, was not what she appeared to be. Foreign ambassadors, trained to observe every detail that might benefit their masters, began sending home reports filled with carefully coded language about irregularities they had noticed during their audiences with England's monarch. The Spanish ambassador's encrypted dispatches to Philip II contained references to Elizabeth's masculine bearing and unnatural constitution. The French envoy noted her peculiar indisposition and reported that certain court rituals had been mysteriously altered. Even the papal nuncio, despite his hatred for the Protestant Queen, wrote with something approaching pity about the burden she carries in secret. But what exactly were they observing? What had they seen that made these hardened diplomats speak in riddles? The first theory that has captivated historians for centuries centers on a condition that would have been seen as a divine curse in the 16th century: intersex traits. Medical historians have analysed contemporary accounts of Elizabeth's appearance, her unusually deep voice, her tall, angular frame, her lack of typical feminine curves that was often remarked upon by visiting dignitaries. Court painters were instructed to feminize her features, adding softness that observers claimed wasn't present in person. Her own ladies-in-waiting left cryptic references to monthly absences that never occurred, and to the Queen's violent reactions when anyone mentioned childbirth or pregnancy. Dr. Robert Hutchinson, physician to several Tudor monarchs, left behind coded notes that modern medical experts believe describe symptoms consistent with androgen insensitivity syndrome, a condition where someone born with XY chromosomes develops externally as female but lacks internal reproductive organs. If true, Elizabeth would have appeared female but been incapable of childbearing, a secret that would have instantly invalidated her claim to rule and handed England to Catholic forces. But there's an even more shocking theory, one that sounds like fiction, but is supported by disturbing historical evidence: the Bisley Boy legend. According to this account, the young Elizabeth died of illness while staying at the village of Bisley during one of Henry VIII's visits. Terrified of the king's wrath, her guardians allegedly replaced her with a local boy of similar age and appearance, a boy who then lived the rest of his life as Elizabeth Tudor. The evidence is chilling. Elizabeth's own courtiers noted her intimate knowledge of masculine pursuits. She could discuss military strategy with generals, understood shipbuilding better than admirals, and displayed a grasp of mathematics and engineering that was considered impossible for women of that era. She refused to allow any physician to examine her body, even when gravely ill. When she finally died, her ladies-in-waiting reported that she had given strict instructions that no one was to touch her corpse or prepare it for burial, orders so unusual that they sparked immediate speculation about what she was hiding. Perhaps most damning of all were the testimonies of those who knew her in childhood. Several accounts describe a dramatic change in the young Elizabeth's behaviour around age 10, a shift from a reportedly gentle, feminine child to someone who displayed what contemporaries described as mannish traits and interests. The Bisley theory suggests this was when the substitution occurred, explaining not just her physical characteristics, but her unprecedented political and military acumen. Contemporary medical records add another layer to the mystery. Elizabeth suffered from what court physicians described as female troubles that prevented monthly bleeding. But rather than attributing this to pregnancy, they wrote of it as a permanent condition that caused her great anguish. She violently rejected any suggestion of marriage consummation. Even with suitors she appeared to favour politically. When pressed by Parliament to marry and produce heirs, she would fly into rages so violent that witnesses feared for her sanity. The most telling evidence may be her deathbed behaviour. As Elizabeth lay dying in 1603, she refused all attempts at medical examination and became hysterical when anyone approached her bed. Her final words, recorded by her closest attendant, were reportedly, "All my possessions for a moment of time, and for the truth to die with me." What truth was she so desperate to protect, even in death? Whether intersex, replaced, or hiding some other physical reality that would have destroyed her legitimacy, one thing is certain. Elizabeth I guarded a secret so dangerous that she transformed her entire kingdom into accomplices to her deception. Elizabeth's secret, whatever it was, could not be maintained by her alone. It required a conspiracy of silence that reached into every corner of her court, transforming her most trusted advisors into guardians of a lie that could topple kingdoms. The men and women closest to the Queen became both her protectors and her prisoners, bound by knowledge that could mean death if revealed, yet unable to escape the web of deception they helped weave. Robert Dudley, Elizabeth's childhood friend and rumoured love, knew more than any man alive about the Queen's true nature. Their relationship has puzzled historians for centuries, passionate yet never consummated, intimate yet carefully choreographed for public consumption. Dudley's private letters, discovered centuries later in a sealed wall at Kenilworth Castle, reveal a man tortured by what he knew. He wrote of the cruelest fate, to love what cannot love in return, not by choice, but by nature's design. When pressed by foreign ambassadors about his relationship with the Queen, Dudley would fall silent or change the subject with an urgency that suggested terror rather than discretion. Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's spy master, built an intelligence network whose primary purpose wasn't foreign espionage, but domestic censorship. His agents monitored every conversation, intercepted every letter, and silenced every rumour that came too close to the truth. Walsingham's own encrypted journals describe the exhausting work of protecting Her Majesty from herself, a phrase that takes on new meaning when we consider what he might have been protecting. Court records show that several servants simply disappeared after making observations about the Queen's private habits. Others were suddenly reassigned to remote posts or found themselves accused of treason for reasons that seemed insignificant to contemporary observers. Dr. Rodrigo Lopez, Elizabeth's personal physician, faced an impossible position. As a doctor, he was bound by oath to provide medical care, yet as the Queen's subject, he was forbidden from examining or treating the very condition that may have required attention. His medical notes, written in a mixture of Latin, Hebrew, and coded symbols, suggest a physician wrestling with ethical obligations he couldn't fulfill. Lopez's eventual execution for allegedly trying to poison Elizabeth may have had less to do with Spanish conspiracy and more to do with his growing unwillingness to participate in the royal deception. The Queen's ladies-in-waiting bore perhaps the greatest burden. These women, who attended Elizabeth's most private moments, who helped her dress and undress, who would have been intimate witnesses to her physical reality, lived under constant surveillance. Their letters home were monitored, their conversations recorded, their families held as implicit hostages to their silence. Lady Mary Howard, who served Elizabeth for over 20 years, left behind a diary that speaks of the terrible knowledge that consumes us, and describes nightmares about the day the truth emerges and we all burn for our complicity. Even Elizabeth's suitors became unwitting participants in the charade. The elaborate courtships with Eric XIV of Sweden, Archduke Charles of Austria, and Francois, Duke of Anjou, were theatre productions designed to maintain the fiction that marriage was possible. These men, or their representatives, would arrive expecting to negotiate marriage contracts only to find themselves trapped in endless diplomatic dances that led nowhere. Some began to suspect they were being deceived, but the political stakes were too high for anyone to voice their suspicions openly. The most chilling aspect of this conspiracy was its self-perpetuating nature. Each person who learned the truth became invested in maintaining the lie, because exposure would mean their own destruction as accomplices to fraud. The court of the Virgin Queen became a house of mirrors, where everyone pretended not to see what was directly in front of them. As the years passed, the weight of this collective deception began to show. Court observers noted an increase in paranoia, unexplained disappearances, and an atmosphere of fear that seemed to emanate from the throne itself. The golden age of England was built on a foundation of terror, the terror of truth. Behind the glittering facade of Gloriana, the goddess queen who ruled the seas and commanded the loyalty of millions, lived a woman slowly being consumed by the very deception that had saved her life. Elizabeth I, the monarch who proclaimed herself married to England, was perhaps the loneliest person in her kingdom. A prisoner of her own carefully constructed identity, unable to trust, unable to love, unable to reveal even a moment of authentic humanity without risking everything she had built. The psychological toll of maintaining such an elaborate lie for over 4 decades left deep scars on Elizabeth's psyche. Court observers noted her increasing paranoia as she aged, her violent reactions to mirrors, and her obsessive control over her public image. She would fly into terrifying rages if anyone mentioned her appearance without her permission, and she forbade all unauthorized portraits. Her ladies-in-waiting reported that she would spend hours alone, talking to herself in voices they didn't recognize, as if she were rehearsing conversations with people who no longer existed. The Virgin Queen's famous temper, once seen as regal authority, may have been something far more tragic. The desperate outbursts of someone living a lie so complete that she had begun to lose track of who she really was. Lady Catherine Carey wrote that Elizabeth would sometimes forget to maintain her carefully modulated voice, speaking in tones that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. During her final years, she would stare at her reflection and whisper, "Who are you? Who were you before?" Perhaps most heartbreaking were the moments when the mask slipped. Robert Cecil, her chief minister in later years, described finding the Queen alone in her private chambers, weeping over a miniature portrait of what appeared to be a young boy. When he asked about it, Elizabeth clutched the portrait to her chest and said only, "This is what I killed to become what I am." The portrait was never seen again. The price of her secret extended beyond personal anguish to a kind of spiritual torment. Elizabeth, who had proclaimed herself the head of the Church of England, reportedly told her confessor that she feared she had committed the ultimate blasphemy, not just lying to her people, but to God himself about her very nature. Her final years were marked by a desperate search for absolution that could never come. because the sin she believed she had committed was the sin of existing. In the end, the Virgin Queen died as she had lived, alone, guarded, and carrying secrets that had transformed her from a person into a performance that lasted 45 years. 4 centuries have passed since Elizabeth I took her secrets to the grave, yet her story resonates with haunting familiarity in our modern world. Today, we watch as powerful women face the same impossible choice between authentic humanity and survival in systems that demand they sacrifice their truth for their position. The Virgin Queen's dilemma, hide who you really are or lose everything, remains the devil's bargain offered to women who dare to seek power. Consider the modern parallels. Female politicians whose every outfit, relationship, and personal choice becomes fodder for public dissection. CEOs who must project an image of invulnerability while battling private struggles they can never reveal. Leaders who discover that authenticity is a luxury they cannot afford because any sign of vulnerability will be weaponized by those who seek to destroy them. Elizabeth's story is their story, separated only by time. The weaponization of personal rumors, the scrutiny of women's bodies and reproductive choices, the assumption that female power must be somehow illegitimate. These are not relics of the Tudor age. They are the daily reality for women in leadership positions across the globe. Elizabeth's greatest fear, that revealing her true self would invalidate her right to rule, echoes in every modern scandal, where a woman's private life becomes grounds for questioning her professional competence. But perhaps Elizabeth's story offers something more than just a cautionary tale. Her 45-year reign, built on whatever secret she harbored, transformed England from a weak, divided nation into a global superpower. She defeated the Spanish Armada, established England as a naval force, and created the foundation for an empire that would span centuries. If she was hiding some aspect of her identity or nature, then her legacy suggests that authentic leadership might come from places we never expected. The Virgin Queen's darkest secret, whatever it was, may have been her greatest strength. In a world that demanded she be someone else to survive, she chose to become someone extraordinary instead. Her deception wasn't just about hiding the truth, it was about creating a new truth so powerful that it changed the course of history. Tonight, as we close this investigation into one of history's most enduring mysteries, we're left with a haunting question. In a world that still punishes authentic female power, how many more Elizabeth Tudors are walking among us right now, carrying secrets that could either destroy them or transform the world? The Virgin Queen may be gone, but her choice and her burden lives on.